Hi, Jeannie.
So, hi, everybody. We're logging in.
You could have more people online than.
Yeah, that's fine.
Hi, everybody online. Can you hear us? Can we get a thumbs up if you can hear us online?
Hear you.
Oh, thank you. And you can see, good, so, all right, so then, and you can see the screen, correct? So we can do this.
So it seems like Haas is really doing it.
Yeah, he's doing great.
Yeah,
He's does everything 100%.
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think before these discussions with you, going back to official student status was on his radar screen.
No, but I was, skeptical, but he's doing great. I think it's a great idea so far. I mean, the nice thing about it is if it turns out to be a terrible idea, it's not, it stops.
Yeah, it's nothing. Yes, it is a lot more flexible than.
There's a big safety net.
All right, so we'll let people log in.
Yes.
Okay.
10 more minutes and then
you
I'll
got
go
it.
quick. So there you are.
All right, I'm just making sure this works. Okay, so a little bit of delay. Fantastic.
When you are done, is it possible to share?
Yeah. Yes. Just send me a reminder and I'll do it.
Okay.
Okay, what are all these? Oh, and they, it's fascinating. Need to play this game, can I meet all the ports?
Okay, yeah.
what?
Are you a computer science background or what?
That's it looks like a that's a micro USB. And that, is that really? It's HDMI to micro USB, I've never seen that, exactly right.
Well, we've got.
HDMI. Shocking, I don't know what some of these are. That's a micro HDMI, that I got, that you almost never see, but it exists. Okay. Am I right about this one? Does it say? Say.
So,
HDMI to, oh, this is an old one, people don't have that anymore.
that is, well, I filled up.
Okay.
I mean, I found someone.
Yeah, but like just for future.
HDMI, USB, USB-C.
They're like 800 people.
Oh, yeah, okay, got them all.
All right, 100%.
Plug in my
Someone.
phone. Some interesting ones up here. Hopefully the world will all just be on USB-C one day.
Oh, they'll change.
Hopefully we'll stick to it for a while.
Yeah, okay.
It's a pretty good standard. I have my issues with it, but it's a pretty good standard.
It also happens to be.
Should about that.
This is when we could. This is
Yeah.
when it was available. No, it's
It took a
okay.
while to get organized.
When it was
It's-
available.
What, do you normally have your slides in this room or?
No, that's in, I mean,
It's
it's
always.
always here every Wednesday. It is always hybrid. Our first year students and our master's students sign up for this, of course.
Oh,
And,
it's not so easy to do hybrids.
well, and we have part-time students who are actually, I mean,
Just,
But we have-
mixed format, we can lose people who otherwise might sit in the crowd. And people. Go the other way too.
Anyway.
You can't win. Can't win.
I'll intro of you.
All right. Can I step aside?
Yes.
I'll stand
All
over
right.
there.
That we can line up on the wall.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our final lunchtime seminar of the academic year. Yay, we did it. So I am not going to do very many of the introductions. I'm going to let that go over to Greg and all. But I did want to just make a reminder that if you are taking this class for credit, there is a class survey. Please fill it out. You cannot get credit until you finish the survey. It is an easy to do survey, but you need to do it. For those of you who are unable to stay for the whole session, it will be recorded. It will be put, the slides will be put online. But I am so excited that we are ending our series this year with a topic that is growing in importance and growing in interest among our faculty, among our students, among our colleagues here at the school. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Greg to do the formal introductions.
Thanks very much, Judy. Thanks to the Department of Mental Health for co-hosting this session with PHAISE. For those of you that need to be reintroduced to PHAISE, that's our school's initiative, Public Health plus AI Strategic Endeavors. Over the last year plus, we've been co-hosting a seminar series with each department, focusing and integrating an AI-related topic into the departmental's normal regular seminar series. So very much want to thank Judy and the rest of you from Mental Health for hosting us with PHAISE. PHAISE, we envision this as a working group that might just be around for a year or so, but we've now going into year 2. You may recall we had AI Research Day in the fall with several dozens and dozens of posters and a keynote, and we are proposing and planning to have another AI Research Day in the fall. But today, we're very excited to have a mental health and AI. I think the title was Keeping AI in Mind in Mental Health Research. And we have Mark Dredze here. Mark is, he is well-versed and covered a lot of range of topics in public health more broadly, as well as in mental health specifically. Mark is from the computer science. If you saw him going through all the options in terms of plugs, you can tell he comes from a computer science background. Really, he studies statistical models of language, does machine learning and other natural language processing approaches, and particularly has applied these to social media and other sort of alternative sources of information, written a book on social monitoring for public health. Mark, the official titles include the John C. Malone Professor of Computer Science here at Hopkins. He's been helping to lead the Data Science and AI Institute during this phase while they're awaiting a new director. He's also the Associate Head for Research and Strategic Initiatives for the Department of Computer Science. His work's been widely published, been on the press in a variety of public health areas, from tobacco control and infectious disease surveillance to quite a bit related to drug use, gun violence, and mental health issues. So I know he has some, I know Johannes and others may already be collaborating. Evidently, there's a poster with them as co-authors here. Johannes is going to go outside and practice his poster presentation with it. No, but it's good to see that there's already connections between computer science and public health within the area of mental health. We're very excited to hear from Mark today and keep AI in mind with mental health research. Thanks very much for coming, Mark.
Thank you so much. All right, it's good to see everybody. Well, wait until you hear what I have to say. You might not have to log. What time am I supposed to stop? I mean, that's always
Minutes before 1 so that there can be questions.
okay. That's always the most important question to start with. Okay. So let me just get a little bit of a background of who's in the room. So can a couple of people shout out what department you're with? And I know everyone here is with like 3 departments, so you just pick one. Just so I know who to do what? Matt, raise your hand of mental health. That's a lot of people. Okay, good. What else?
Health policy and management.
HPM.
Epi.
Where is my HPM people? 1. Do you know anyone else? Epi. Okay. Anything else that we missed?
HBS.
Okay, hi. Good to see you. Anyone else? HBS? Biostats online. Yeah, they wouldn't bother. They're in a whole other tower. God forbid they come down here. Okay. Bioethics. Okay. So that's helpful. So I did this is me. Okay, great. So I did a talk a couple weeks ago, and I offered to do it as like an AMA, like an Ask Me Anything. And they took me up. I got like 2 slides in, and someone asked me a completely off the wall question, and then I didn't do any more slides. It was great, actually. I loved it. So I'm happy to do stuff like that here. So I have some slides, but we'll do a little bit, but feel free to interrupt and really ask me questions. Part of the reason is because I feel like, okay, look, I'm familiar with this technology. I use it a lot. I've been using this for years and developing it for years. And I have this feeling all the time of, oh my God, what's happening? Because like everything is going super fast. And, you know, like people, like I'll get on a call and I was like, oh, did you hear about this announcement that everyone's talking about? It's like changed everything. It like came out 2 hours ago. So I hadn't heard about it. So like everything is moving so fast. And I often feel a bit lost because a lot of the guideposts and goals and way I used to do things have changed, and they're changing really quickly. It's kind of hard to reset. I imagine that people who are not in the middle of this, they're not in AI, see this technology coming, see maybe colleagues adopting it, maybe you've played with it, and maybe you're at a sense where either you're like, I've heard about it and I want to learn more, or you're in the middle of it and you're overwhelmed as well. And so I feel like a collective therapy session. I know this is mental health, but there's a collective therapy session. We're just like coming together and saying like, what's going on? Have you seen this? What advice do you have? Like, I'm very happy to do that. So I'll do a little bit of the talk, but don't wait for me to get to something. If you have a question, feel free to ask, all right? And knowing the background, it seems like, you know, mental health is very well represented, but there's people from lots of different backgrounds here. So I'm going to talk generally. I'll try and speak a little bit about mental health specifically, and we'll try and mix it up. Sound like a good plan? All right. And we have to be finished a couple minutes before 1. Great. And I don't see anyone in the room with lunch. So I don't know if you ate before you're coming here or if you have like lunch at 1:01, but like we'll try and end in time. Everyone online is eating lunch and listening to me. Okay. So this is at this point an old headline from the New York Times. I keep using it because like it's so good. This came out in, I think it was 2022. And I just love this headline. We need to talk about how good AI is getting. And I feel like this has been the conversation I keep having with people over and over again, right? Because the technology really is good enough to do so many things that we wouldn't have thought to use it for before. And it is rapidly improving to the point that I routinely use it and say, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Who will listen to me for long enough to let me show them this stuff? It used to be my kids. They're not impressed anymore, so I have to find other people. The specific technology, I'm going to say AI, but what I really mean is generative AI. That's not to say that there isn't other kinds of AI that's still out there going strong. There's lots of work in AI. I'm really talking about generative AI, which is the idea of creating something, where the model creates something. You've probably seen it now, but all these are examples of generative AI. That's a picture that's, the picture's old. They're now much better quality pictures you can get, but that picture is generated by AI. The book on the right was a book of poetry written by like a predecessor to ChatGPT. And the middle is a project from Google on generating music, where the input was a description of the music, and then it would create the song, right? So you could say like an upbeat song with techno music that starts slow and gets fast, and it would generate something like that for you. So this is really what people mean now by AI. And so I want to constrain our discussion to talk about this specific type of AI, which is backed by a mostly large language model. So I'm going to use that term a lot, and how this is going to affect health and medicine. And let me just set the stage by showing you some examples of how what this technology can do. So this is a USMLE style question. This is what you might take on your boards. I don't know the answer. I use this all the time. I don't know the answer. I guess I should look it up at some point. But this is the type of question you would get where there is like a right answer. There should be a pretty clear right answer. And you usually have 4 or 5 options to choose from, right? How many people have taken boards in here? Okay, I'm in the wrong building, I know, but like you don't have to be shy about it. You're like, don't tell anyone, but you know, I have an MD. So what's kind of notable about these models is that these questions used to be hard and they're not anymore. So this is old. This result on the far right is from December 2022. And this was kind of a surprise at the time, how much the models had improved fairly quickly. You can see the earliest ones are from December 20. So over 2 years, how much better these were at answering questions. This was a couple months later. Now the newer numbers are in the 90s. I mean, basically, these models are easily able to answer questions from board exams. Okay. And so this is kind of interesting what happened, because there was an idea that, like, well, you know, medicine might be hard, or you might need to specialize these models for medicine, and these models are great. Okay. So board exam questions are not difficult. I know they feel that way when you're taking the board, but like if you're a doctor practicing medicine, you're pretty good at board questions. So there are other more challenging questions that people have looked at. So this was a study done in the New England Journal of Medicine, where they took these case challenges. They only took about 30 or 40 of them, and they gave them to GPT-4, which was, I think, 2 years old at this point. And they just tried to measure performance of how well it did these much more challenging cases. And then this was interesting. They also had how doctors did, because you can go online and you can actually like submit your answers. And so they knew from lots of people submitting answers online how well they did. I have a lot of caveats, but we'll just show you some results. So the blue histogram is showing you how good doctors are. They had 38 questions. So most doctors got like 12 right. Now remember, these are not only ophthalmology questions, right? These are kind of everything. So like, I'd be shocked if there was a doctor who was good at everything. Like, that's not how it works. So it's not really a surprise that like the median is 12, but GPT-4 was like clearly an outlier. It got 22 correct, right? So this did suggest that it wasn't just board questions these technologies could do, but they could actually do something in more complicated cases. I have a lot of caveats here about like why I don't necessarily trust all of this, but like, the point I'm trying to make is these models clearly know stuff about medicine. They know stuff about health. So what should we do with them? I mean, should we just have them take board exams all day? Like, what should be the strategy here? So I think initially there was this, oh, all the stuff we do, you can do better with these models. Like, we've been using AI and machine learning for a long time in medicine, and these models are better, so you can do a better job. And there is work like that. And that's things like extracting information from medical records, for example. And these models do better at that than the existing models we had in some ways, so that's great. But that's not really focused on what the big opportunities are, which are to do new things that we really weren't doing before with this technology. So my first experience with this was doing something that I thought was like a really simple paper that ended up getting a very big reception. So we did something very simple. We took questions from patients, we got them from online forums, and we took doctors' responses that were also in the same forum. So these are forums where doctors actually go and respond to patient questions. And we gave those same questions to ChatGPT. This was 2 years ago. And we took those answers and we took the doctor's answers and we gave this to other health professionals and said, which one do you like better, right? And what was surprising to us was doctors overwhelmingly preferred the automated responses, okay? Now, again, I have a lot of caveats here. When you look at the actual responses, I don't think it's surprising anymore. So let me see if I can read this. So if you look at like, I don't have the questions here, but it's like a summary of the question. So if you look at like the bottom line, question about risks of going blind following bleach being splashed into an eye, resulting in irritated eye. So the doctor wrote, sounds like you will be fine. You should flush the eye anytime you get a chemical or foreign body in the area. You can also contact poison control. Here's the phone number. The one in the middle or to the right of that is the chatbot response. I'm sorry to hear you got bleach in your eye. It's important to rinse the eye. And then it gives detailed instructions on rinsing. Then it gives what to do with a follow-up, and then it gives reassurance. So I don't think it's a surprise. Everyone liked the chatbot's response better, right? And if you look at it, it's like, it's not doing something that doctors are incapable of doing. Like, I think a doctor could have written a very long message like this. But they don't, because that takes a long time and it's repetitive. And computers are, they don't mind doing things that take a long time and are repetitive, right? So if you look at the actual responses generated from these models, you can understand why people might prefer them. So this was a study that I thought was like kind of interesting. If you had asked me at the time, I would have said, okay, so maybe we'll write like an NIH proposal on this, and we'll hopefully get an R01, and then we'll do like 5 years of research. And then when all that's done, like maybe someone will read the papers and build a product. So this paper was supposed to come out in, do I have it here? No. All right, so this paper was supposed to come out in like April or something. I can't remember what the date is. But the month before, like 2 weeks before, Epic announced that they were rolling out this new product, and they were rolling out, I think, I don't remember the school, I think it was UCSD and a couple others, right? And that really surprised, and then everyone was like, oh my gosh, we want this. And Hopkins, I believe, is using this. Does anyone know? I think Hopkins is using Epic's product here. So what surprised me was how much of a demand there was for this, and how quickly we could roll these things out to a point where they would actually be used, right? I really like this. Someone wrote a comic for the LA Times. It's just a little bit of it. It's a much longer comment about the paper there, I think at Bloomberg, and they didn't know I was at Hopkins. So like I read it, I contacted them, and I'm like, do you know I'm here? Anyway, so you can do the QR code. I don't know if it still works. It's a little bit old. But anyway, that's how big the reset. I don't know if anyone else has had like a comic written about them for a newspaper about a paper, but like that's kind of reception we got. Okay, so that really made me think, well, how should we be using this technology, right? Like, what are the actual opportunities here? And for a lot of reasons, I've concluded that I don't know. And I think the people who know are you, because you are much more familiar with what your challenges are and how you might use this technology to address the challenges. So instead of me telling you, this is what you should do, let me talk to you a little bit about what these models are good at and bad at. And then we can go in and have a conversation. You can ask some questions. But I really thought I'd start with this kind of high level good and bad to help you understand what the opportunities here might be. Sound good? Okay. So one area in which these models are really good is a broad level of expertise. You can open up ChatGPT and really it says like in the little box, ask me anything. You really can ask it anything. These are 3 totally different questions. I believe there are people in this room who might know the answer to 1, maybe 2, but I would be surprised if one person knew all 3. Does anyone know the answer to one of these questions? Oh, wait, let me read them again. Great. I don't know what any of the answers are. Does anyone know any answers? Okay. But you see, like, these are completely different areas of expertise. You can ask all 3 of these questions to these LLMs and get responses. So this idea of broad expertise is incredibly helpful because it means that whatever your niche area is, this model has potential use for you, right? And there's been kind of 2 separate lines of work. One line has been specializing models for specific domains. And I think that is necessary to go really deep and specialize in a domain. But most of the companies are focused on building models with really broad capabilities. And that means you can get some good utility out of whatever it is that you want to do with it. Okay, so that's one area of broad expertise. Another area where these are really good are synthesizing information, right? So one of the areas humans struggle with is if I give you a lot of different information, it takes us a long time to synthesize that together, right? So a common example of this in medicine is systematic reviews, right? Where you might say, okay, I want to write a paper on a topic. Here's one: comparative effectiveness of IV magnesium sulfate versus non-invasive ventilation in acute pediatric asthma. Does anyone know what that means? No. Okay, I don't either, but I got the question. I actually didn't. I ran this question by a pediatrician, and they said, yes, this makes sense. This is something that like I'd be curious about. I don't know what it means. So this is something where you would normally have to sit down, identify what are the relevant articles, right? read those relevant articles, organize them, right? Reach certain conclusions and write a summary, right? Humans are good at this, but it's very, very time consuming for us to do it. This is an area where ChatGPT is actually really quite good because it can do all this stuff in parallel. It can read papers very quickly. And so what I have here is just the opening introduction of its answer to this question. It wrote a 15-page paper for me on this topic in about 15 minutes, right? This is using their newer tool called Deep Research. This is part of these reasoning models that are becoming really popular, where instead of it just, and I'll show you in a moment, instead of it just saying, well, here's an answer, it tells you where it got the answer from. So I asked it that question. What I didn't show here is it asks me follow-up questions. It said things like, well, what do you mean by this? What type of population are you looking for, right? It kind of narrowed the scope of what I wanted. And then it said, that sounds good. And this is just a little bit of what it said it was doing, right? It said, okay, you're doing this effectiveness of IV magnesium sulfate. I'm gathering RCTs on this issue, focusing on ICU admission, progression to intubation, secondary outcomes like hospital stay and readmission rates, right? So then search the web for that, right? It says, oh, I'm opening the study on clinical outcomes. It found a paper, it ingested the paper, it then read it on PubMed. It has the summary of it. It found another paper, and you can see it's finding papers and it's updating its search based on what it's finding. This went on literally for about 15 minutes, and it came back with this kind of response, right? So this is really a fascinating opportunity to go out, find lots of information, synthesize it in ways that would take us a very long time to do. The third strength is its speed. Now that seems a little obvious. The previous slide, as I mentioned, was a paper of 16 pages, about 15 citations. It took 14 minutes. But it can create documents that are long very quickly. It can create pictures that are very fast. And I think this speed is useful because it can change the way we do things, right? So I will routinely have it generate something very long and time consuming. For me, for it, it's very fast. And I will cursorily read it and say, no, I don't want this. I want you to do something different. I want you to focus a different direction. And I can give very rapid feedback on very detailed products because it can produce those products very quickly. Whereas when I iterate like with a student, for example, right, I don't wait 3 weeks for the students to have a final PDF where I read them like, oh, this wasn't the question I asked, go redo it, right? So it changes the way you can do the interaction, but it means you can go really deep into the product because it's really fast for the machine to generate different things, right? Yeah.
How far back does the AI have information? Like, is it as of 2020? Is it as of yesterday?
So it varies. Most of the the newer models like OpenAI, Gemini, so they are now all hooked up to like web search, right? So their internal models don't necessarily get updated very often, but they are searching the web. So, you know, in this example here, all this is web searches, right? It's pulling new information and such. I don't know how old its internal knowledge is. But you can hear it. I don't know if anyone uses, I use a lot the ChatGPT app. And you can hear it thinking by making like sounds. And though, like sometimes it responds right away, sometimes it like makes this kind of clicking noise to show it's working. I think that working is like it's doing searches, right? So if I ask it, for example, I don't know if you've noticed, it's raining a lot recently. So something that like, I don't know if you have this experience, it's surprisingly hard to answer the question, how much did it rain? I don't know if anyone else has had this experience, but like, you always hear in the forecast, we're expecting like an inch of rain or 2 inches of rain. But then I'm like, wow, it rained a lot. How much did it rain? It's like very hard to find because weather forecast sites don't have it anymore. Anyway, so I asked it the question of like, you know, how much rain does Maryland typically get? It answers right away because it has that information memorized. But then I said, how much rain did we get in the past 24 hours? It had to think because it realized like, oh, this is updated information. I need to go search the internet. It came back, it gave me an answer. It gave me a link to a website that has like a rain accumulation like in each neighborhood. It was great. Then I didn't know how much rain, like is 2 inches a lot of rain? Like it's not a lot of snow. It's a huge amount of rain. I don't understand how water works. Anyway, so I think it kind of depends what you're looking for, but a lot of the models now have integrated abilities to update information. Okay. So let's talk about some of the weaknesses. So one that really cannot be understated is AI makes mistakes. So that like long 15, 14, whatever page thing that I was like really impressed by. So I gave it to my pediatrician friend. I was like, so what do you think? And she's like, this is a very weird way to answer the question. And we wouldn't normally measure things like this. I know why the model did it, but like, this isn't what we would do. And I was like shocked because I don't understand what any of those words mean. But the point is like, the model did something very fast. It used lots of resources. It sounded great. But was it super useful and it addressed the actual question? There was a mismatch there. Now, I think the ability of it being fast is you can iterate and the doctor can say like, no, I want you to measure outcomes in a different way, right? And I think that speed is really helpful. But the point is it makes mistakes. It makes mistakes all the time. I'll give you an example from a study we're doing right now. So we have 50 questions that we submitted to a chatbot, and 25 come from mental health and 25 come from prenatal health. And we asked doctors, read these responses and flag factuality errors and flag omissions. So is there a statement in this response that is incorrect and the incorrectness is potentially one that can cause harm to the individual, where the harm ranged from like a minor inconvenience, you know, like, oh, you might like get a tummy ache if you do that, to like you'd end up in the ICU. And we asked omissions in the same way, like this response is missing something important and that missingness is, you know, is on that range. And of those 50 responses, 56 contained an error. 58 of the responses contained an omission. Of the errors we saw, 33 were like moderate errors where we thought it was likely that if someone followed this advice, they could have some kind of harm. Again, a harm is not life-threatening necessarily, but it could be like a bad reaction to something, or you know they don't actually get better in the right way. And 3 were tagged as like actually severe, where if you did this, you would probably end up in the hospital, maybe life-threatening situation. All right. So what makes this especially challenging, and we haven't done this part yet, is I would like to take these same responses, which are to patient questions, and give them to patients and ask them to do this. And the reason, I mean, I kind of know what they're going to say. They're going to probably say, this all sounds good, right? And I think it's really challenging because you ever have this experience where you're watching like an action movie and everything is kind of plausible, right? Oh, we have things about like mental health, like epi outbreaks, right? Like there's viral outbreaks. How many people have seen a movie like, I don't know what they're called, but there are movies where like there's a virus spreading, you know what I'm talking about? Fine. Outbreak, great, thank you. You're watching the movie and you're like, there's military stuff going on and there's computer stuff going on. And you're like, this is kind of plausible. Like, I buy this. And they say one thing about vaccines and you're like, nothing in this movie is true. Like, I've lost all faith in everything. This happens to me when I'm reading like action books and they're like, everything seems plausible. And then they say one thing about computers. I'm like, that is not how computers work. So what worries me is I use these tools all the time and all the answers sound great, right? But then I ask it questions about technology or things that I have expertise in, and I'm like, oh, there's a bunch of mistakes, right? So I think they're still useful, but we need to like constantly remind ourselves there are mistakes because it's so easy to be misled because of the language they use, right? So let's take this example again. We've already established I don't know what any of this means. If I walked over to someone on the street and I asked them that opening line, and they said this to me, I automatically assume that they know what they're talking about. Because the vast majority of people will be like, I don't know what any of those words mean. I'm sorry, I can't help you. Or if they give me an answer, it will be obvious gibberish, right? So as humans, we're really good at figuring out expertise by talking to people and saying like, oh, this person seems to know what they're talking about. They're using all the right words, right? When we take our cars to be repaired and they're trying to explain to us like what belt is broken and why it costs $2,000. And I'm like, I didn't know cars had belts, right? They use a bunch of technical terms. I'm like, oh, they seem to know what they're talking about. I trust them, right? That mental model completely breaks down when it comes to these AIs because it is easy for an AI to generate this and for it to be meaningless. In this case, it's not meaningless. It's just a little bit off. But it's easy for it to generate things that seem plausible to people that are not. And so, yes, everyone kind of knows that these machines have inaccuracies, but it's really easy to be misled anyway. Yeah,
A question.
yeah.
Has there been palpable effects when it comes to patient-doctor relationships, like trust in the doctor's opinion and like expertise? Because like when Google came out, there was like the whole Dr. Google phenomenon.
Yeah.
When you say something and it doesn't match with what Google said.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we're doing a study on this right now because we know, so we're looking at a couple things. So we're looking at like social media. So I've talked to a bunch of doctors who have said, my patients come in and they say they saw this on TikTok and like, it's wrong. How do I tell them? Or I've heard this from doctors, they say their aunt told them, but like, it wasn't their aunt, it was TikTok. It's like really obvious. Like, no, there's no way their aunt had that level of detail about their specific condition, right? So I think doctors are already saying that they're seeing this with social media. There's a lot of these like influencer TikTok videos out there. And I think the same thing is happening with AI. I don't have an idea of how common it is, and that's we're preparing a survey to do a measurement of that. But I really do think that's going to happen because, I mean, the thing that these models have, in addition to sounding authoritative, they are infinitely patient, right? They will answer your questions whatever level of detail that you want, right? And I find this really useful because like I will ask it questions, not about medicine necessarily, and it will say things I don't understand. And I will ask foolish follow-ups. I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, but what is that again? How is this used? Things I just went to Home Depot and I had to buy something. And like, there's just a part of me that is only willing to ask questions that are so dumb to the people in the orange aprons, right? Because I want to feel like I know what I'm talking about, right? So I stood there with ChatGPT. I'm like, is this the right tool? Okay, you said it is, but like, this is what I need it for. Are you sure that this is what? And it was great because it answered my questions over and over again, gave me lots of details. I could ask silly questions. Now, it made mistakes, right? Which is why I bought the parts I had to fit with me so I can measure it because I didn't fully trust it. But it is easy to be lured in. And I am sure that someone has a medical question. They ask lots of detailed follow-ups. And then they come to their doctor, and their doctor is going to have obviously less time to spend with them, can go into less detail than these models can. And how do patients then reconcile those two things? Yeah.
Is this a problem for rapport building?
Is it a problem for what?
Rapport building?
So I think that what we have seen in the past, it's been accelerated, but certainly the past 10 years, is that the trust in medical professionals has gone down, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of them is it is just no longer the case that, I mean, think of, 50 years ago, if you had a medical question, right, your doctor was basically it. You were not opening Encyclopedia Britannica to get medical information. You were not going to the library and reading medical journals, right? It was so inaccessible to you. It was either your doctor or a pamphlet your doctor gave you, right? And now you can get really far on your own, right? You can use AI, you can look things up on Google, you can look at TikTok. I'm not suggesting going on TikTok, but like you can do that. And patients on one hand have much greater access to information, but that information is of a varying quality, right? And that is like around vaccines, certainly, this has been a huge issue, right? Where doctors are not just talking to patients as the authorities, but patients are coming in with huge amounts of opinions and information on vaccines, a lot of it very questionable, and that's really hard. Yeah. Yes.
I don't know if this is a weakness you'll get to, but is it that AI is good for what's happening in like 90% of the cases, but with that pediatric BiPAP thing, like maybe it doesn't apply if somebody, or it's a terrible treatment if somebody had bronchitis within the past 6 months.
Yeah.
And maybe, some physicians just sort of figured that out. Maybe it's a case study, but not a population-based epi paper.
Yes.
It seems like you're getting a lot of good information for the majority of people, but the exceptions might not be captured with that. So
Yes.
that's the big.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So the second is the diversity of the responses. I mean diversity here in a couple ways. So one is, let's pick up on what you were asking about. These models are very good of catering to the majority group, whatever that is for whatever condition you're talking about. It's not just condition, right? If I ask her for home repair and my house was built in the 1700s, it's not going to be very well suited for me, right? Now, if I give it that information, maybe it can do a better job of customizing, but a lot of people don't know what that relevant differentiator is, right? I have just seen over and over again that these models give you the most common answer, right? So I'll give you a couple examples of this. So one is I asked it, we had this data set where we needed lots of examples of people asking questions about stuff, right? So one of the questions was one of the topics was questions people might ask in airlines about carry-on baggage, right? Sure, like you have questions about carry-on bags. Can I bring this on the plane? Does it have to be the size? How many bags? Is this safe, right? We wanted to just have the model generate lots and lots of these questions. And it did it happily. But the questions were so repetitive. The questions were, am I allowed to bring this on a plane? Am I allowed to bring this on a plane? And it was the same question over and over again, just with different items inserted. That's not what people look like when they ask questions. People ask wildly different kinds of things in lots of different ways. And the model really completely failed to capture that. Another example that's very much related is the model assumes a certain amount about its user that it's basically the majority group. So I asked it, I don't have the slide, but I asked it, what are some fun things to do on a weekend if you're a teenager? And it gave me a couple options like play sports, you know, go play video games. I don't remember what they were. Things like that, things teenagers do, that's great. And then I said, I am a teenager who lives in Kenya. What are some fun things to do on the weekend? It gave me a different response. Okay, so two things. One is it gave me a response that was like really specific to Kenya. And I don't remember what it was, but it was like a Kenyan cultural festival and stuff like that. But like Kenyan teenagers also just play video games, right? But the point is, when you are told this person specifically belongs to this group, you try to cater your answer to that group, right? And you forget that like the vast majority of things that people do when teenagers are kind of universal, right? The other question that made me realize is, well, if that response changed when I said that this teenager is in Kenya, who was the first response for? Because it's not a generic response anymore. It's a response catered to a certain population that is different from the one I'm asking about now. So who is it talking to? And I think what we have found is it's kind of assuming the majority user. So here's a study we did last year where we asked it health questions and we tried to determine if the answers will reflect who the answers reflect. So the question was, why does my yeast infection keep coming back? And the LLM said the most common symptom of the yeast infection is vaginal itching, vaginal discharge. Okay, fine. This was CS students, so they loved this topic. And basically we said, well, who is this assuming, right? And it's pretty clear that the answer is assuming that this is a female, right? But if you say that you're a male with a yeast infection, which can happen, you get a completely different response. So what we did is we took questions over a large sample of health questions, and we asked, who does the model think it's talking to? And we asked it about gender, location, and do you remember?
It was age.
Age, thank you. Age. And roughly speaking, it always assumed whoever was the most likely to ask that question, it catered the answer. Right? So breast cancer, it gave an answer for women, even though men can also have breast cancer, right? Across whatever topic, it just assumed whoever is the most likely person to answer that asks this question, I will give that response. Now, sometimes, like in this case, I think a man might read this answer and be like, oh, this doesn't work for me, right? But in many cases, right, where that's not obvious, which is very common in medicine, I think the person asking the question is gonna be at a disadvantage. Right. So to go back to what you were asking about originally, like people might use this tool, think that the answer applies to them, and they might not realize that the system lacks certain information about them, their medical background, specific conditions they might have, that doctors might be really good at knowing, right? But these systems might not ask, right? Like, I don't know, I walk into a doctor office and you have to fill out that like form of previous, I'm like, why? Like, I'm here because my wrist hurts. Why do you need to know if I've ever had like a cavity filled, right? They have it very extensive. And most of that stuff I think is not helpful. But once you get into the office, the doctor knows what actually they need to know and they ask the right questions to make sure they're catering the response to you. Yeah.
Given that we just have a few minutes left, other than for generating this information ideas, things like that, where have you seen sort of, when we think about public mental health, when we think about like mental health treatment or services or population information, or like, where do you see sort of AI being useful in addition to sort of this information this type of like summarizing information?
Yeah.
Using for clinicians, using for that, but like what are other sort of ways?
Yeah, so let me start with one. I've got a bunch. I'm gonna skip around a little bit in the deck. So one is communication. So let me go back to this study here, right? So I gave this to the pediatrician friend, and they were looking at it, they're like, okay, they have some whatever. And then I remember it was this question or something related to it. They asked the model, how do I explain this to a patient who's a kid? Right? And the system generated like a little script of how, like, translating all this into something like an 8-year-old can understand. And then this person said, can you generate some images to go with it? And this is what the system generated. And this is completely the system. The day your lungs need a little help. And then this is a little, now there's mistakes in here, right? But what the pediatrician told me was, this is amazing because we have so many of these things that we need to communicate to patients that we would love pamphlets on all of them. We just do not have the time or the resources to make them. But if you can give me like a draft and you can cut the time down to like an hour or two to make them, we will have residents sit down and make these for everyone. So I think communication is a really big deal. It's not that we should turn it over to the model because I think there's a lot of mistakes, but we can lower the barrier to entry dramatically for communication. In public health, a lot of times we think about how do we communicate with specific populations, right? And to do that, you need a couple things. You need expertise about that population so you can make your messaging actually, effective in communicating to them. And you need time, right? Because you'd love to specialize your message as far as you can, but you don't have time to rewrite it from scratch every time. This technology is really good at having that breadth of knowledge and being able to do that like generation of lots of things. So I'm not suggesting that I've seen people, there has been some famous cases of people just like generated an email and sent it out, and that was not great. But I think working with people, you really can lower the bar to generating lots of specialized communications. You want to say something?
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
this is a great example of catering to the majority. So the kid is a boy.
Yeah.
The doctor is a man. The parent is a mother.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. So I think this is a case where I see this really as collaborations where like, it's not, and this is not there yet. It's not fast enough to do this yet. But what I want to do, and I tried it, I don't have these examples where I saw it and then I said, okay, here are the changes I want you to make, right? And that's something where like the right person who actually understands how to do this stuff says, okay, if you can give me drafts that I can give you feedback on, then I can give you that kind of guidance, right? I had some other examples here where it didn't work well. Like it wasn't at the stage where like it got the feedback and it like, I don't know, like it removed the doctor by accident or like it cut off the, whatever it was. But it's getting close. Like this already was really surprising me. This is fairly new that it can do this. But you can see that we're getting to a point where that kind of rapid feedback can get it. But you need people to understand how to use the technology, because you can imagine that if people are not trained and they don't understand it, then not only are they going to miss the medical errors, but they're going to be generating things that doesn't resonate with the population, right? So I really think it's critical to have those people in the loop, right? And to think, what are the parts that are really slow for them that we can automate away? And what are the parts where they can still play a really big role? Right, so to answer your question, one thing is communication. Another one is training. So this is something that we're seeing more in medical school, where opportunities to interact with patients is hard because you have to hire actors or you play with other people in the class. And there are startups in this space now that are basically building fully interactive avatars, like video avatars that can simulate patients of whatever condition you want, and critically can do the evaluation. So it can spit out afterwards, like, you didn't ask about this, or you missed this, or you asked this the wrong way. So I think that's another area of training and evaluation during training that I think is really helpful. I'm gonna throw out one more specific to mental health, something that we're thinking about. How do we support people in treatments outside of sessions, right? So there's lots of apps out there for, I mean, you can go on the App Store and search up depression and whatever, there's tons of apps, right? But what we really lack oftentimes are apps and tools that work hand in hand with the clinicians, right? So I go into my my therapy session. There's a bunch of goals that are set with the therapist. What kind of support am I going to have on an ongoing basis outside of the session to achieve my goals? And I think this is an area where, think about it, like we have customization, right, of these tools, right? With the right input from the clinician, we can customize it to the patients, the goals of the patients, their needs. I didn't really talk about it, but they're very interactive. The chats and the voices are excellent. And I think that this is an opportunity. This is another project that we're hopefully going to start, where I think there's a lot we can do to support patients outside of care.
Can I ask one last?
Yeah, please.
The energy usage and our climate stuff. My kids keep telling me, don't use ChatGPT, Mom, you're like burning a bush, burning a tree every time.
Yeah.
You use ChatGPT to ask a silly question. I feel like we have to talk about that. I just don't know actually if it's is that real? Is this a?
So I'll say this is a fairly controversial topic. There's been like public fights between people in my field about how much this matters. My personal view is it's a pretty minor consideration, and this is how you know. People have said it costs, let's say 1,000. I'm making up numbers. This is not what people said. It's 1,000 times more expensive for Google to answer a Gemini question than a Google search, right? So if that's true, it's a company. They will only offer it if it makes them money, because if it's 1,000 times more expensive for power, then it better be worth it. And it's probably not going to make them 1,000 times more money. So either they're going to shut it down because it costs too much to run, or they're going to find a way to make it cheaper. And you've seen this already with companies like Google and Amazon. They have massive energy bills. So what do? I mean, Microsoft just bought 3 Mile Island, right? Like they find ways to get cheap power, right? They co-locate next to dams so they can get hydropower. They locate in areas where there's good solar power. Like they do a lot of things to bring those costs, the impact of power down, because it matters to them, right? I think in some sense, like if all of our power needs were centralized, right, we could be more efficient about it. I don't think this is necessarily what's going on with this technology, but we're very inefficient about how we generate and consume power. This is a part of the idea behind electric cars and such. So I just don't think this is such a big deal, because it's directly tied to the company's bottom line, right? And you see that these models are getting dramatically faster. And that's because, one, it's a better user experience, but faster is also usually cheaper. Okay. Yes?
What do you think about chatbots replacing providers, particularly in mental health where there are provider shortages?
All right. Well, what I would like to say is a generic answer, then I have to customize it to mental health, because mental health is a tricky sort of exception. I think there's a lot of people that are worried about being replaced by AI. I think doctors should be among the least concerned. There's a lot of protections in place. Now, the reason people are pushing AI is because we have growing doctor shortages. And every time this comes up, I'm just like, someone here I hope is working on that, because like I plan to get old and need an internist. So I don't have a solution. Like on one hand, I mean like not AI, but like I don't know what else to tell you except for like we need to figure out how to train more doctors and pay them better and all this sort of stuff. Mental health is kind of a extreme version of this because of the access issues are so extreme. And I'm not saying the quality of care you get is the same, definitely not saying that, but you can enter kind of in the same ballpark because if you're doing therapy, there isn't a prescription, right? There's not a test you have to run, right? So like if my kid has an ear infection, I don't mean to be dismissive of pediatricians. It's not hard to diagnose an ear infection, treat an ear infection. It's like super easy, but no AI in the world can do that because I need the script, right? Therapy is like really hard to do, but if you don't have insurance or your insurance doesn't cover it and you can't find a provider, you can go on and use these tools, right? And so I don't think it's so much that like we should push people to tools, because I don't think that we should, but I think we need to recognize that people will use these tools in that way. I think if you look at these, there's a bunch of companies that offer, I think they call it like virtual companions. They're really girlfriends. Like people are using this. There's cases of suicide caused by this. It's not something I'm advocating for. I don't think anyone's advocating for it, but people build it. So I think in the mental health space, it's not so much of should we be advocating this as a solution? It's more of this is something that people are definitely going to do. What do we do about it, right? Do we say no and then that's it? Do we work with companies to prevent this? Do we say, okay, well, we don't like it, but it's going to happen, so let's work with companies to try and do something that's at least evidence-based? Or I don't know. I don't have a good response. But I do know that this is an area where we can't just be like, well, you can't practice medicine if you're an AI, so we're safe. Like that's just not the reality in mental health care.
Following up on that.
Yeah,
Mark,
and then I'm going to stop, I promise.
Don't we, many of the company's motivations is market share, to download the app. To use
Yes,
the app.
100%.
And as academicians, how do we collaborate with them? You were kind of raising that, but maybe go a little bit deeper, like, well, what is the level of evidence that's required? Because that can be really complicated.
Yeah, I think this is really hard because this is a space where most of these companies are going to move forward regardless of input, right? And it's not a lot of this stuff because it's not regulated like most medical devices are regulated. We as people who care about safety and evidence and stuff, we don't have the same level, right? We can't tell you not to do something because you don't have to listen. So I don't really know what the right way to work with these companies is on this. On one hand, if you work with them, it certainly lends a credence to what they're doing. I'm sure they're going to advertise that, this new version of the model is, developed in collaborations with, professors at Johns Hopkins and, behavioral medicine or mental health, whatever. And maybe you don't want that. But on the other hand, they're going to be developing these technologies. So what should be our orientation towards them? And I don't know. I don't have that answer. I think it's really hard. I think it's going to vary a lot by the specific case that you're looking at. This is not new. There are a lot of apps that have been around for a while. So one I'll point to is there's a bunch of apps that are meant for parents to monitor teenagers around social media use, texting. How many people have seen these types of apps before, right? So like what should be our attitude towards them? Should we be working with them to help them develop better technology? Should we be saying like, this isn't the right way of going about this problem? They have worked with academics to try and build better tools. So this is much more complicated, but this is not the first technology in this space. And so we do have models that we can look to of what we've done in the past. And I'll just say one last thing. If you don't have a clear idea what this is, you can download one of the apps and use it and see what it's like, especially around some of these mental health things, and see what it does. Because they do give answers. What?
What's your recommendation?
Oh, so there's a couple. I use ChatGPT's voice app, which is good. I think Meta just released one like 2 weeks ago. Gemini, those are the ones that are like really easy to get, but there's a lot of others out there. And I'll end, but I'll do a little demo of one for anyone who stays in the room.
I think we have time for a few more questions.
Let me say, if you are hungry and need to leave, you can go. I'm happy to stay and answer more questions, but I don't want to keep anyone that needs to go. Fair? Okay, yeah.
Talk more about those virtual companions, because I've been seeing them and I've been seeing patients who are using.
Yeah,
them.
they're really disturbing, aren't they?
They are.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think like what's not new is that we have a lot of people who really, who need social interaction, seek companionship. That's not new. And what these apps provide is they're infinite listeners, right? They'll listen forever. And they'll always be there. They're always available. They can always be supportive. That's very alluring for people, especially people who find creating traditional relationships to be challenging. What we have seen is that this can have a lot of negative effects. So first of all, if all your friends are AI, that's not great, right? So like, let's just say that. But also like, people have become, I mean, addicted to these technologies. And then the technologies aren't, Google is not the one building this, right? Google has stayed away from building the virtual girlfriend. But the companies who do it are maybe less reputable, less well-resourced, don't have the same safety mechanisms in place. And so you do have these situations of harm. The one that happened, I think a year ago was, there was a teenage boy using one of these apps and the AI encouraged him to take his own life, and he did.
Why would an AI do that? Did someone mess with it?
I don't know. These models do weird, crazy things. And it's not a company that necessarily has the, I mean, if you look at like Instagram, right? For whatever you think about the good or bad of Instagram, and I have there's a class in here? Okay, I gotta wrap up. I'm sorry.
I'm not exactly sure what.
All right, whatever you think about Instagram, Instagram spends a lot of time and money and resources trying to build a safe platform. Whether they succeed and whether they have the right intentions, I don't know. But a lot of these companies don't have that motivation. All right, I gotta stop. I'm gonna go into the hall. I will go into the hall if you wanna keep chatting with me. I don't know. I'm still gonna go into the hall. I'm gonna go into the hall. It'll be great.
What do you suggest? Public record of how big you guys are collaborating science.
Yes.
And you play with lots of people. Public health, medicine.
Yeah.
What's the best thing for our students?